what it is.
I'm Hannah.
And I'm Tristan.
And we're bringing you The Spectrum. The shit we're covering today is pretty sick, per usual.
If you enjoy our creepy stories, lightly salted the comedy, please don't forget to give us a subscribe and scratch our backs with a like and comment, and we'll scratch your backs with stories about crazy people.
This story begins in the ranks of a small German religious group called the Lorber Society around the 1950s. This society's beliefs were pretty normal for anybody that would just get together, make up a bunch of shit, and then believe it. The main belief expressed by that group was everyone that wasn't a part of that small group was of the devil and inherently evil.
Another belief that they taught and insisted of its members was self-denial. You know, no having too much fun, life should be bland, like unsalted crackers or Megan Fox's acting, etc., etc. Harold Alexander, future father of Frank, cared for the leader of the cult during his dying days, and upon his passing, announced to everyone that he had inherited leadership of the group. He was questioned by no one. Also, they probably didn't call themselves a cult, but hey, whatever.
Upon the birth of his second child, Frank, he would introduce his newborn son to the group as the Chosen One. Harold explained that his son was the voice of God and commanded them to obey his every whim, no matter how unusual it may be, because it was God's will.
Everyone in the group accepted these claims, including Harold's wife and Frank's mother, Drogma. Growing into his teens, Frank's hormones would kick in, as they often do, and he started wanting to have sex. But he was afraid of exposing himself to the evils of the people outside of his group. It was around this time that he told his father that he was going to be engaging in sexual activities with his own mother. Ew. That's turning into some real Oedipus Rex shit, innit? And then later, he would involve his older sister. Ew. They probably Eiffel Towered and Alabama Hot Pocketed.
Hey, what about that Cleveland steamer?
Yeah, they probably Cleveland steamered. Soon, it all became business as usual.
It was normalized within the family. They wholeheartedly believed that Frank Alexander was the Chosen One, and without a question, they accepted his every word as God's law, including his idea that it was blasphemous to have sex with someone outside of their very specific system of beliefs that was only practiced and followed by a couple hundred people. The head of the family, Harold, strongly encouraged these incestuous engagements.
Go get him, Tiger!
Soon enough, the police began investigating them because Frank's little sister shared a little bit too much information with her friends about what went on behind closed doors. At the same time, these rumors made their way back to the cult, whom had been suspicious about this from the get-go.
And what the cult had to say about this was... ew. Harold embarrassingly resigned as the leader of the Lorber Society, and then him and the rest of the Alexanders moved outside of the reach of German police to an apartment in Santa Cruz, bringing along with them a portable organ that Harold received along with his leadership with the Lorber Society. The youngest two of Frank's sisters, who were a set of twins, would grow up not understanding that what went on within the family wasn't normal, as even moving to a new town and starting a new life, the incest continued to happen.
Even after leaving the Lorber Society, they clung fiercely to their extreme and unusual beliefs, including that Frank was the voice of God and infallible. They continued to adhere to his demands. Their new neighbors were definitely aware of the organ and their routine chanting. Other than that, the Alexanders just pretty much stayed to themselves.
Ew. They barely even left the apartment, but one night they did. On December 22nd, 1970. One of the younger Alexander twins, Sabine Alexander, would be working as a domestic helper at the villa under the occupants of Dr. Walter Trinkler when there would be a knock at the door. Whenever he answered the door, he saw two men there that were very dirty, it looked like they may have been covered in mud, and they announced themselves as Frank and Harold Alexander, and they said that they had come to speak with Sabine.
They waited for her on the patio, and when she came, Harold nonchalantly gave her some very disturbing news, to which the doctor was either eavesdropping or simply overheard. The news itself was extremely shocking, but also to his horror was the reaction he had gauged from Sabine regarding this news. She was very casual about it. The doctor ended up overhearing Sabine's father tell her that him and Frank just killed the other 3 members of the family. It then occurs to him that this isn't mud all over them. It's human blood. Like a lot of blood.
Confused and frightened as the doctor was already, he then saw Sabine grab her father's bloody palm and bring it to her face, and she rested her cheek on it and said, "I'm sure you did what had to be done. That's wonderful." Sabine then embraced her father, but the hug was short-lived whenever Harold noticed that the doctor was still standing there. With confidence and charisma, he announced, "Ah, you've heard. Frank and I have killed my wife and other daughters. The killing hour." And then the doctor probably said, "Hell yeah, that's ballin'. I gotta go take shit. You guys chill here for a sec." He then ran inside of his villa and locked the door and called the police. Whenever authorities arrived, to their confusion, the Alexanders confessed everything and explained that it was the killing hour, as if the officers were supposed to understand what that meant. Frank and Harold were taken into custody. Womp womp.
When authorities arrived at the scene of the murder that morning back at their apartment, they walked into a real bloodbath. The house? Destroyed. Papers and garbage? Everywhere. Dismembered body parts and organs? Nailed to the wall.
Well, you can't just skip past that last part.
Dismembered body parts and organs were nailed to the wall.
Some real Texas chainsaw shit. You see, Harold and Frank, more likely Frank being behind it, had created this idea called the killing hour, which was based on their ideas that women were inherently evil, and in order to get into heaven, they had to be purified, or murdered, in other words. They had orchestrated this idea to all of the women of the house, and all of the women of the house immediately accepted it. The idea that one day Frank was going to announce that it were the killing hour, and then they would all wait to be killed by him so that they could get into heaven. Through sacrifice, they would reach salvation.
After their lunch on December 22nd, Drogma would take a nap with her husband. Frank would then come into the room and sit at the end of the bed and stare at his mother. He would later explain to psychiatrists that she looked at him with a demonic gaze, so he began to slap her and described himself as transforming into a superior being. Frank then announces that it's the killing hour. In response to this, Drogma lays on the bed on her belly and allows herself to be beaten by Frank by a wooden coat hanger that lasted for over an hour.
And when this beating first started happening, the father Harold jumped up out of bed, and at first he started celebrating. And then he ran into the living room and started playing the organ like a maniac while Drogma was being beaten to death by a coat hanger. Which to me, trying to picture this, is fucking terrifying. I mean, Jesus. And then hearing their father playing the organ, the 2 out of 3 sisters who were home came out into the living room. As they probably frighteningly looked into the room to see that their mother was being beaten to death by Frank, their father announced to them that it were the killing hour. And so they went into the middle of the living room and waited to also be beaten to death by Frank, so that they could get into heaven. Frank then made his way to the living room and started beating first his older sister, Petra, who was 18, until she lay limp on the floor, and then his younger sister, Marina, who was 13.
Harold and Frank switched out, taking turns from playing the organ and beating and mutilating the girls. They cut off all their nipples, breasts, sexual organs, and even Drogma's heart, and nailed them to the walls. During this assault, they used pruning shears, shoemaker blades, a coat hanger, and a hammer.
When the deed was done, the father and son danced around and rejoiced, for what they saw themselves doing was not a monstrous deed, but rather them saving the girls from damnation. Throughout the investigation, the Alexander men would passionately defend their actions, showing absolutely no remorse. They said that they played with their organs to celebrate them going to heaven.
Ew.
After being examined by psychiatrists for not very long, they were determined to be unfit to stand trial and were committed to an asylum for the criminally insane, and were not permitted to leave without direct permission from the court. Sabine would beg authorities to go live with them at the asylum away from impure people because they wouldn't be there, but her requests were denied. She was then sent to live in a convent. She changed her name. Her whereabouts today are unknown.
In 1990, Harold and Frank escaped the institution. Authorities would search for them, but the trail went cold. Nobody knows where they are today, but here at the Spectrum, we suspect Frank is Gary Busey. Thank y'all so much for watching.
We hope we got to teach you something that you didn't know, and if we didn't, where's your show?
We hope y'all join us next week, and until then, see ya.